All right, guys. Welcome to the roundtable of the public policy cluster of the Center for New Economic Studies. We are in the December 2023 roundtable, and the theme we have for this roundtable is integrating climate change in local policy making, a leap and a commitment. I welcome all of you, Revathi, Jheel, Sankalp, and Sutikshna. Uh, so I'll start by defining the theme, what the theme revolves around, and what are the questions that the theme poses before us. And then we'll have all of you speaking on those questions, and maybe we'll try to come up with some points by the end of this roundtable. Uh, so climate change, it sounds more like, a topic of international relations, but it is as much of local importance as of, a global importance, because it is only local policy making and, implementation that can impact a climate, policy at the global front. So how do we integrate some, a vision of the globe, something as large as climate justice into local policy making? By local policy making, I mean any and every kind of policies that are implemented at, ground levels, from education policies to development policies to infrastructure policies to poverty alleviation policies to even, policies like how to allot funds to where, because climate change is something that first of all, I'm reminded of a quote which I read somewhere, that poverty is hierarchic, but smog is democratic, because climate change doesn't know any boundaries and it can impact anyone and everyone in the long run. uh so we'll start with the first question that is ahead of us. The question is: the rise of the developed world has been fueled by fossil fuels, and the global south finds it difficult to catch up with the developed world with the non-fossil fuel path. What then in the way is the way ahead, and what should the developing world's growth policy be? How should the developing world catch up with the West and the developed world, while choosing an unconventional path, a path that is not lined up with fossil fuel development? So this is one part of local policy making. How do we make policies that aim towards a development, but a development with an adjective which is sustainable? So maybe you guys can raise your hands and then we'll go around the house. Jheel, would you like to start? All right, Revathi raised her hand. Yeah.
Hi, Nepal. So nice to see the entire cluster together again. So climate change and the entire discussion regarding COP28, which just recently happened, has been very interesting. So the first point that I want to make is we often talk about how the West is, you know, they are they are where they're supposed to be in this fight against climate change. But I would argue that the West is not where they're supposed to be. If you look at it, the United States is the second largest emitter of carbon emissions, followed by France, Germany, Canada, Australia, and all of these countries which emit a lot of carbon. And comparatively, if you look at the countries that they often instruct to reduce their carbon emissions, it's not even half as much as what these so-called developed countries are emitting. So I think the climate change fight is extremely unfair because on one side you have all of these countries which are such huge emitters who have already for so many decades been emitting carbon, and now they are forcing countries that do not have the resources to transition smoothly into more energy efficient ways of production to forcefully reduce their carbon emissions. So what needs to be done over here is that we have to make this a fair fight, and this can be done with a twofold approach. The first one is that uh, countries that have the resources to transition more smoothly into energy efficient ways of production need to help underdeveloped countries make that transition because they can't do it themselves. For example, if you take the United States fund to fight climate change, it's about $100 billion. But if you look at Kenya's fund to fight climate change, it's less than $10 billion. And if you take a microscope on that and investigate that fund further, you'll see that it's often that fund consists of grants or loans that are given by developed countries. So eventually, Kenya would have to pay back the money that is given to it to fight climate change, which is not fair. They don't have the resources to do that. So Western nations, number one, they need to cut their own emissions, and second of all, they need to help countries that do not have the resources to fight climate change.
Great. Thank you, Revati, for your points. Very relevant points and very nicely put. All right. Jeel, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. So as Revati pointed out that yeah, the developed countries need to fund the developing countries, but somehow I don't think like it is very much the every country sees their own need first, and it's like it was discussed in G20 also. Everything was talked about, but it was never mentioned that the developed countries are going to fund the financially policies like that was never not substantiated in that in G20. So it's I think as developing countries we need to take up a step over here. The whole global South, the Africa included, and every other country have should mobilize funds through collaboration, through local through participation of each and every country, because I personally have a very uh, pessimistic view towards the developed countries helping, like doing something, giving funds to the developing nations and all those things. But yeah, so like at the end, I think we all should step up and just as a collectively we should uh, we should set up a fund for the developing countries and all. Yes.
Thank you so much for your points, Seal. Yeah, as you pointed out, it's really important to, think and pinpoint where the responsibility lies. And then, as you talked about the fund, we had such a fund in the last year's COP conference, but then it's very important to carry forward such a fund and maintain it. Thank you so much for your points. Yeah, Sankalp, we'll come to you.
Okay, so if we're talking about how the developing and developed world should first of all get together, the first thing I believe is that the developed world is already working upon and has worked upon all have used the coal and the energy, the non-renewable energy for the development. So we can't just say that if they use, then we also should use that, and it justifies our use. I believe that the time is different right now. We are facing a climate change issue, and it's really a tough situation. And as Revati has said, that it does not, and as you also said that it does not hierarchy here. Like it'll affect them, it will not affect us or anything like that. It will affect all of us. So if the West is not getting mature enough, or if we're not getting enough funding, I think the developing world, global South, as they say, they should collaborate and they should work together. I know there's been differences between China, India, and this nations like Pakistan and then Africa. There's also divisions out there. They don't know, they don't have technology. But one thing I believe that there was the one project called IMEC. Other than the transport lines, it had a solar energy and the energy sector involved in that, wherein the wind energy and the solar energy, it used to it is supposed to be transported from Norway to Saudi and then to India. So if there's any surplus of energy out there, then they'll easily transport it, but it's still not implemented, or it's not in progress. It's still yet to be implemented. So other than that, I believe that there are various other projects between India and other foreign nations, collaborations like which they're searching for, which they should do, especially with the Nordic nations because they have good expertise in the solar and turbulent and energy. Other than that, I believe that for now till 2050, India is using coal and the non-renewable energy because we are not having an infrastructure ready for renewable energy. But the West, I think they should accelerate themselves because they have the financing, they have the needs, they have the capability, which which can make them completely be or start to be reliant on renewable energy, which they are doing, I guess so. But for the rest of the world, they should slowly start doing so. And if we look at the records, then the biofuel alliance, which was also set in G20, is really a good move. And also, there's been 600 or 700 billion being needed for financing each year. So I don't think it's a number which uh, every nation could reach out, because we are facing war and there's shortages. So all these issues are also there in the world. So I think it's really difficult. But as I said, West should accelerate. They should have the progress, and the developing countries should continue to like realize this and help each other if they can. If West is not helping.
Thank you so much for your point, Sankalp. You showed us the other side of the coin also, that the 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 fact that the West has had a fossil fuel led development is not an excuse for the developing world to go on the same path again. And then, as you mentioned, the amount we are spending as a globe on climate justice is nowhere near to what is needed. But then, as you pointed out, West should lead the way by example, and be a sort of light for the rest of the world. Thank you so much for these points. We'll move on to the next question, which is with all the question, we'll lead more and more towards the theme. So the first question has set ground for what we are about to discuss, which is how can countries such as India uh, integrate climate policies in its day-to-day policy making. So as I talked about in the introduction, that climate change is not divorced from other issues such as education or poverty or inequality for that matter. So how can we integrate climate justice into other policies, and how should countries such as India, which is a developing nation, should do that? So anyone who would like to start? All right, Revati.
I think India's already made a few leaps in that aspect. We're definitely going in the right direction. The first thing that India did was create that National Action Plan for Climate Change. There have also been a few unique initiatives, like the government of India has made some strides in making the railways completely green. Like we're beginning to switch from, we're beginning to switch to electric engines, and the entire ticketing system, which was first completely paper based, has now completely 100% been digitized. So the railways are becoming more greener, they're having more electric engines. The government has now, in some states, especially in some part of Karnataka, single use plastic is banned. And the government of Karnataka, especially, they've created so a little context. First, the ticketing system, even in buses locally and across Karnataka, was completely paper-based. The government has entirely digitized that now. They've come up with a scheme of e-passes, e-tickets. So there's no paper. They've wiped out most of the paper use. So now it's mostly electronic. That has been great. And also, I think Jindal also uses a lot of solar panels, if I'm not wrong, to power their hostels. So a lot of universities are also doing that. They're using solar panels instead of they're switching to using solar panels. So these are the few initiatives that I can think of uh, when I think of what kind of initiatives India has taken, and hopefully we'll see a lot more in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all these examples. We should indeed, adopt these best practices from around the world. Thank you so much, Revati. Who would like to go next?
Shall I go?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there was this one thing I had read about regarding climate change, like where there are the slums, mostly the slums are located near where the factories and all of those manufacturing industries and all of those are located near the slums, mostly. So it's always the marginalized, the poor people around factories, uh, uh, or any industrial, like you see Bhopal gas tragedy. That thing, the slums around the factory, that was the whole factory, the Union Carbide factory was around the slums. Mostly the industrial factories establishments are around the slums, and it is always the poor and are marginalized who are affected by climate change or by pollution and all of those carbon emissions, whatever we read. So I
Yeah,
per-
thank you
I
for
pers-
yeah.
yeah, so I personally feel the major thing that India can look towards to is first of all the and how where factories, all of these industrial establishments should be there, like where they should be established. A proper legal protection should be given to all the, like, the point is, because they are marginalized, very small community, poor people, their voice are never taken into account only. All of these things needs to be heard, and community mobilizing is one of the very mobilizing of the poor, the marginalized people is one of the ways where their through which their voices could be heard. And I think development, the planning of the city, how a city should be planned, spatial ecology uh, is one of the uh, streams into in environmental studies and all of these. And it has very much environmental justice, and is very much related to equality of all the people, of all the stakeholders involved. Yes.
Yeah, very great points put forward by you, Jheel. Uh, you mentioned how there are two sides to climate justice. One is cutting emissions on a whole, and then whatever the emissions, how to not let that impact the disadvantaged even more. So both sides are really important. And then converting it into a community mobilization and a mass drive, and truly said that town planning and city planning is the way forward, because developing world is now on the path of urbanization and migration within them. So this is the right time to adapt these policies, and maybe what the global north learned in 100 years, maybe we can do that in 5 and 10 years. Thank you so much for these points. Yeah, Sankalp.
Thank you, in the part. So first thing, I believe that how India and the other developing countries, they should learn or they should adapt like the climate change and include it into the daily policy making. I think India is already doing something about it. Life, I think you've heard about Life. It's a life campaign which PM Modi also talked about in G20. So the thing that individuals, I think they lead the way, not the government, not the policy makers and all. Unless and until the individuals don't understand, there'll be no change. So life is the one thing which I believe that is one thing which can help developing countries, because if I don't prefer electric vehicles or any device or sustainable development energy, then what will happen? It'll make no change. The people will protest. So I think education of the people to make them understand sustainable energy is good. The climate change is a real threat, and the life movement helping them to adapt in better ways. That's one way I think to make better for the policymakers as well. So because in implementation, that's the one thing which is really important here. Second, I believe that we should learn from Jordan. Like Jordan has set up a sector working consisting of development partners, the civil society, and the ministry. So they have identified 35 priority actions based on criteria like gender and other issues, also the sustainable development issues. So India should make a team like this, have a project, and then also get some funding from the private sectors. Also, the coal consumption should reduce, because there's one concern that despite the sustainable energy and renewable energy, the coal sector has getting investments, has getting good amount of money from the private sector and also from the government, because like in April 2021 there was 29 billion or 30 billion allocated to high coal production for the for our industry. So that should be reduced, and we should also have some international partnerships. Like there's also Indo-Germany Energy Forum, which was established in I think 2006. But then we should have more of these to encourage research and development. Also have some collaboration with the developed country, which has already faced these problems, as in the past said that we should learn from the lessons and work upon it. So I think all these things, one is that people should be together. Second, getting collaboration, international collaboration, learning from the best. And third, reducing the coal uh, spending would be good so that the developing countries could learn and be better in the climate change.
Yeah, really nice points, Sankalp. Uh, yeah, as you mentioned, some ministries are already, sort of leading the way. Maybe we can have, such a system where maybe some institute, some think tank like Niti Ayog can collab with all the ministries and set benchmarks and standards for, everything they do. So some food for thought. All right. So we have addressed some portion of the third question already, which was about climate justice, about how we can make sure that social and environmental aspects, since they go together, how can we balance them with each other? We have covered some portion of it. Maybe you guys can speak on that when you answer the next question, which is uh, what are some workable policy measures? So far, we have talked about, what the issues are, what the challenges are, what the history is. Now, maybe for the next 5 minutes or so, we can talk about what is the way forward, what are some workable policy measures that we can work on as we aim to become, a developed country by 2047 as the leader of the global south? So some policy measures that you guys have in mind. So maybe Jheel, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So there's this thing like I personally feel that capitalism and uh, environmental the whole climate change issue. So there's always this thing that companies like they the factory manufacturing and everything they start produce like item for the production of goods and everything. Like if they want to invest more money to make it for to make something sustainable, to make a product more sustainable, more money needs to be invested, more funds and everything needs to be invested. But sometimes due to like they want to the companies want to cut their costs, increase their profits, they won't do that. Okay. And over here, I think the government had needs to step in. Like R&D, I think should be one of the very major. Like if there's no research and development in this sector for sustainability, to make sustainable products, to have sustainable infrastructure and everything. For that, I think government needs to step in to subsidize all of these things for the companies. So they can at least start investing. Like I you see uh, all of the clothing brands, like you have everywhere. And due to this, the habits of consumers, the consumerism uh, is also like widespread. There's conscious consumerism is not there very much. And all of this starts from, I think, the companies, the productions. They want to gain more profit and everything. And over here, I think subsidies from the first step where the private sector can actually make the use of the subsidies to for R&D to make more sustainable products. And I think like we have carbon pricing and all of those things also, where taxes are put on the companies which produce more carbon emissions. And so all of these things need to be in practice, where uh, companies should be the private sector should be held accountable if they are producing more carbon emissions, and then they should be held accountable through more taxes. So yeah, that like for I think everywhere it starts from the production, the private sector for me. And then it
Yeah.
leads to and then it leads to the consumerism, the consumers.
Yeah, very interesting perspective to look at it. Yeah, Revati.
So I have two initiatives that we could probably do. The first one is digitization. Try and scrap out all the paper usage. Try and get everything as computerized as possible. And second one is we could probably switch to a greener foreign policy, which is collaborate with countries who are who are rich in natural, like Azerbaijan, the future host of COP29. It has a lot of natural gas resources. Singapore, if I'm not wrong, has a mechanism in which it makes ocean water drinkable. So if we can collaborate with these countries and use and inculcate their mechanisms into our country, it would work out really well.
Thank you, Revati. Sankalp, maybe you can share a couple of points in 30 seconds or so, since we are running short on time.
Can you hear me? Okay, so
Yeah.
I think I'll have to just add one or two points which I think would be great. First, I think internationally, there's one organization, Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. It's the world's largest coalition for financial institutions, which is committed for uh, net zero. It helps economy go into net zero. So it has a pool of $130 trillion. So India should try to get access to that for finance, because we all know what we should do, how we should develop. But we need financing, so it's one thing, one way we can go for. Another, India should have green taxes, but not pressure private organizations, because India has to create a good environment for
Yeah.
businesses.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Really nice points, guys. That brings us to the end of this discussion. Maybe, as you guys said, we went from global to local, and finally from local to global. These two they go together, and that is how the future is lined up for us. So thank you so much for joining on this round table. We had a really nice discussion. Thank you, guys. Good night.